This month, we are talking about accessibility and friction in the retail journey. So in the UK in 2021, customers were expected to spend £141 billion in online shopping last year. However, 89% of retailers said that they wanted their platforms to be improved when it comes to the e-commerce aspects of their sites and probably other things in terms of the way you find information and products on there to buy as well. So what we're looking at is, yes, there is an experience gap out there. How could better accessibility help you reduce that going forwards? So that's what we're about today. We're going to look at 5 different aspects of that in the next hour. Why bother? So that's a lot of statistics about how accessibility is probably more people than you think about. Find stuff, buy stuff, and get stuff. Those are the sections which are obviously massively important to every retailer out there. If you can't find stuff, you can't buy it. If you can't buy it, what was the point of the website? And actually these days, especially because a lot of returns are happening, if you've got some clothes that you want to send back, it's not just the experience you get online that's important. It's actually that whole round trip experience that needs to be accessible. And finally, we're going to be just kind of landing this with making accessibility happen at the end, about how to make sure that systemically you've got this working well in the organizations you work in. So I'm going to hand over to the third of these people in a second, Pete Bricknell, who's going to be leading most of the sessions with me. We've also got Toby Mildon, who used to work for us, but now runs his own diversity D&I consultancy. And Rob Wemyss from our team will be kind of dropping in halfway through as well. So my name's Jonathan Hassell. I'm CEO of Hassell Inclusion, and I'm going to be taking the other bits. So Pete, you've grabbed the screen. Over to you. Why bother?
Right, I hope this works, because Zoom has just said Zoom has quit unexpectedly, as I decided to share, which was not what I expected. So we're going to talk a little bit about carrot and stick. And we recognize there's people on this call who work for a wide range of organizations. So when we think about retail, we think about e-commerce, many sites have some element where you have to sell or offer items for purchase to customers. So this may well be, you may not be a retailer specifically, but your site may have some elements of that. First thing, let's think about some of the stats. You probably know this already, but something like 20% of the population in the UK have some kind of accessibility need. But I really would like to share that all of us will have that need at some point in our lives. So it is not, it's not for some people, whether you're like a new parent, maybe you're driving, maybe you're sitting in bed and you want to change your lights, switch them on or off. There are a whole variety of reasons why you might need accessibility. And there's a great quote here from one of the teams at the UN. Accessibility is the best loyalty program you can have. It's more effective than any mileage card, a loyalty card, or anything. And when we think about 20% of the population have an accessibility need, of course, they have families, friends, and relatives. And when I speak to people and interview people, they often say, now I have a child with a need that I know about. I'm looking at everything differently. I'm looking at everything that I purchase for a company that understands my kid, my nephew, my niece, my mum, whatever. So it affects us all. And in the retail world, there is a lot of lost spend. So the Purple Pound, We Are Purple, did some analysis on this, and they think that about £2 billion a month are lost by ignoring the needs of disabled people. Why is that? Because a lot of people get barriers to they give up and they go elsewhere. And so 75% of disabled people and their families have
I think we've just lost Pete. So I'll continue. I seem to be having a few technical problems with this setup.
Can you hear me again?
There we go. We can hear you again. And Pete, I'm sharing the slides from my screen because they weren't coming through. So just tell me when to advance. Thank you.
Fine. So accessibility can increase your revenue if you are thinking about there's 20% of the population who are not being served very well. If you can move to the next slide. And so what does that mean? That is moving people from the invisible 20%, I talk to some organizations where they say, well, we don't think about people with disabilities because nobody asks for it. Well, that's probably because you're not even noticing that they're not coming to you, or that they're giving up and you got a basket that hasn't been converted to a sale. So if you get it right, you got better reach because more people are being served. You got better engagement because they know how they can work with you. And that gives better results for them, and it gives better results for you. Or should I say it gives us better results for us, because we're all going to be in that state at some point in our lives. And that moves people from the invisible to the loyal. If you can move on to the next slide. So if you don't design for accessibility, it's like saying to every fifth person who walks through your door, I don't really want your business. And if you said that to the marketing team or the sales team or the CEO saying, actually, we don't want 20% of our customers, they would be pretty upset. And if that's not enough, if you can move on to the next slide, beware of the lawyer. So we have a graphic here which shows that in 2018, there's in the States about 2,300 legal cases. 4 years later, 2021, there's 4,000 legal cases. And in the States, 412 out of the top 500 have been targeted with legal claims in the last 4 years. We actually see a statistic which says if you've been sued once, you got 20% of the people who get sued the first time will get sued again within 12 months. And we've had that with clients of ours where they thought they could pay off the issues and settle out of court. And then 2 years later, that same company came back to them and said, you haven't fixed everything, so we're suing you again. So it's happening more. We don't see it in the UK because people settle out of court. And we're seeing that smaller companies are now becoming sued. So it is, if it's not going to affect your top line, it's going to affect your bottom line. Move to the next slide. So I have a graphic here which shows that over time in the States, the number of lawsuits that have been happening over time. So come 2007, Radio Shack, which was an electronics retailer in the States, then Target, which was quite a famous case. They turned around and in more recent years have become very good at accessibility. And then you're seeing Toys R Us got sued in the end of the 2010s, Hugo Boss, New Balance, Nordstrom, cosmetics companies, more and more people in the States are being sued. And what starts in the States often comes over to the UK. Move on to the next slide. Is that just coming on to the next slide?
Yep, we've got it.
Good, there we go. And it's not just the web. The other trends that are happening. So we talked about it's going to increase revenue. We've talked about if it doesn't increase revenue, you've got the risk of reputation and legal. And then we've got the change of behavior. And what we are seeing is that shopping is becoming hybrid. So if I look at an organization like Screwfix, which is a tools retailer in the UK, they've got the physical stores, they got the web, they got an app, they got PDF downloads, they got social media voice, and they use a lot of third-party agents to do delivery. The experience you may have is I'm sitting at home on my web looking at some products that I want to buy from Screwfix. I take the app to go down to the store. I pick it up from the store. I might need something to be delivered in a couple of days, and I'm going to be working on multiple elements. And so we need to make sure all of those works. And if they don't work, we've got challenges, again, on the legal side of it. Things like in the States, end of 2021, there was a lawsuit against podcasts needing transcripts. There are people who've been trying to use overlays to fix their websites and then discovering that there's a problem, and that lawsuits are then saying, well, they actually haven't solved the problem. So we're now finding it's not just the web, it affects mobile, it affects the agents you use. So there's quite a lot in there. And let's make this real. Let's talk to one of my colleagues, Toby, who I've worked with for a while, who has a huge experience about living life and using digital tools. So Toby, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Pete. So I have worked with Jonathan and the team for a while now. I've got a neuromuscular disability that I was born with called spinal muscular atrophy. So I've been a wheelchair user since I was about 2 years old. I require 24-hour care and to do all aspects of daily living. And I work full time. I'm a diversity and inclusion consultant. So I'm very reliant on using assistive technologies to not only do my work effectively, but to enable me to just get on in life and do things in life, like use public transport, send greeting cards and things like that. So I'm going to share with you just some of the apps that I use, and I suppose why I've got a bias towards wanting to do things digitally rather than just operating within the physical world. So if I fly anywhere within Europe, I have a preference for booking or flying with EasyJet. And the reason being is that I can book my assistance, so I need to be helped or lifted on and off the plane at the same time as booking my tickets. If I want to fly with another airline, I can't do it online. I have to ring a special number, wait in a queue before I can speak to an operator in order to book my tickets. Whereas EasyJet, I feel like I can just book a flight just like anyone else. When I want to get somewhere, I use black cabs in London because every black taxi in London is wheelchair accessible. I use an app called Get Taxi, which is basically like Uber for black cabs. But what that enables me to do is hail a cab instantly from the warmth and comfort of my own home or office or wherever I am and get straight into a taxi. But also there's that kind of traceability built into the app. So if there's a problem with the taxi driver, not wanting to pick me up because I'm in a wheelchair, which has happened in the past, then there is that kind of accountability built into the app. Whenever I take a train, I like to use the Trainline app. Because I can't physically lift my hands to even feed myself, I can't use the ticket machines to book tickets independently, but I can buy tickets by myself through the Trainline, pay for it using Apple Pay, and then when the guard comes around on the train, I'm then able to myself get the ticket and show them the ticket on my phone without having to ask somebody to reach for a paper ticket. If ever I want to send cards to somebody, like a greeting card or a thank you card or a birthday card, I'd like to use Papio to do that. I can't hold a pen to be able to scribble notes in a card, but I can basically go online and choose a card and write my message in it electronically as well. And then finally, reading books. I'm not strong enough to be able to pick a book up or turn the pages. So I read all of my books through Kindle, either the Kindle app, or I can log into Kindle through the web browser, or I can use the Kindle app on my phone to be able to access books as well. So if I'm working on my laptop and I want to be able to just quickly check a reference book, I can quickly log on to the Kindle through the Chrome browser and then just quickly get straight to a book without having to physically pick up a copy. And I am now getting more into audiobooks as well. So yeah, so that's just a quick roundup of how I use technology.
Great, thank you. So another perspective is for older people. We have a picture here of Jonathan's mum. My mum is in a similar situation. She has had to go digital in the last 2 years. That's much more digital of buying grocery items, buying from retailers like Amazon. So they will still continue to do this post-COVID, but there's quite a lot of sites that are really hard to use. They might meet accessibility standards, but certainly my mum got very confused on trying to open a bank account or things like terms and conditions. Can she actually find those, read those, download those? So, Jonathan, if you could just move to slide 22, we'll talk a little bit about the whole customer journey. So what we're going to look at is in finding stuff, looking about marketing, looking about the hybrid experience and search, and some tips on what you can think about around improving the way you find stuff. In the buying stuff, we're going to talk about how the website works, thinking about the information you need and what you're going to buy and how to buy it, and then getting stuff, picking it, tracking it, and delivering it. So I'm going to pass over to Jonathan to talk a little bit about finding stuff.
Thanks, Pete. So finding stuff. You can't buy it if you can't find it. So we are going to look at this across the different sort of channels or digital channels that you might find. So the key thing is that for those of you who know a lot about accessibility, obviously WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, version 2.1 AA is the one that you normally use. It's there for websites. It does an okay job if you're doing mobile websites, but if you're doing native apps, actually, you also need to be looking at Android's guidelines if it's for Android, or Apple's for iOS. Similarly, if you've got a kiosk that you're looking at, so actually you're in store, the set of guidelines for that are actually very, very different, and the whole situation is very different. So just thing to be aware of, which is that because there are lots of different devices, it may not be accessibility implementation in the way that you always do if you're trying to do a kiosk rather than web. So a few hints and tips for finding things. First thing, when you are doing your designs across all of your channels, it's a really good idea to make sure that there is good color contrast between the text and background. So again, this is a thing that most people normally are thinking about, 4.5:1 text contrast that you could find with a color contrast analyzer. Similarly, using suitable fonts. So WCAG doesn't actually require you to use some fonts and not others, but research that we've done with people who are autistic finds that things like mixing serif and sans serif fonts on a page can really puzzle them. And a lot of people who are dyslexic find that handwritten fonts can be really, really difficult to decode. So make sure the essential information on the page is conveyed with a body font, something like FSME Pro that we're using here, Arial, all of these sort of more normal fonts, as it were. We're not saying you can't use more fancy fonts, but some people may not be able to read them, so they can't be the essential information. White space, making sure that there isn't too much on the page. You'll probably see that some of my slides might have a little bit more because I try and put more onto them, but make sure there's enough white space for people to handle. So, and the key thing here is this does cover web, print, video, banners, and PDFs. For example, most people don't think about doing accessibility when they're doing their annual general report or their signs around the buildings, but HSBC did. They're one of our clients who we were working with a while ago. These are the first versions of those. We were able to help them on their way. We're doing great things there. Social media, please don't forget that social media needs to be accessible as well. If you think about the customer experience, oftentimes the reason that Twitter is there and it's part of that retail journey is because you use it to try and attract people to your websites, especially if there are any sort of sales or bargains or anything like that, or you're trying to get your brand out there in a more interesting sort of social way. So when you're using Twitter, things like balancing abbreviations. Does everybody know the abbreviation you're about to use? Camel case, so that's using the first letter of every word in a hashtag, which doesn't have any spaces in it, making the first letter of each word a capital so that a screen reader will present that well and voice it well. Don't use weird characters. There are some odd characters that look kind of Germanic and all the rest of it in the further reaches of the ASCII character set. They may look great on screen, but again, screen readers don't know that that's a German A. It just knows it's character 227, and that's not really an experience you want to give people. Adding alt text, adding captions, making sure that people can get the right sort of experience from you in dark mode. We like using examples of where we've got it wrong. So you can see dark mode of one of our emails on the left there, our Hassell inclusion logo. Yes, that's black text on a mostly black background. What we were able to do was to work out how to switch that when people are using dark mode. Good design is accessible design. There are a lot of kind of interesting trends out there at the moment. Some of them are good, some of them are not so good. If you were on the call last time, you would have seen some of these there, like simple, informative, minimal interfaces. That's great. Wild typography, not really. Glassmorphism. It is harder for me to read text on top of an image than anyone else, and that will be even more so the case if I were dyslexic. So just to bear in mind. And similarly, there's some really interesting things happening with Figma and interactive prototypes going forwards. Make sure that when you're thinking about how you do your designs, that accessibility is not forgotten. If you want more on this, we have a whole section on this next time. As I say, this is a hybrid world. I was mentioning kiosks earlier. One of the really interesting things about kiosks is like ATMs, or down here at the moment, you've got a kind of seat back of the seat in front of me. When I was flying to Vienna, had a screen on it. Those are digital experiences like you would have with a kiosk in a store that don't have assistive technologies available for them. So it's really important for you to be thinking about, okay, because somebody is now in store, can they get the best of your in-store digital stuff? Answer most of the time is no. But the answer is actually in your pocket, because if you can use your mobile app and interface that with the purchasing process in store, so I can purchase something from my app and then pick it up from the counter in front of me, then actually accessibility is still on a platform that you can control. It's that sort of thinking that is going to really help you. When people are looking around your store, you put all of these signs up to make sure that people can find the right aisle for the products that they're looking for. This is the equivalent of good heading structure on a website. If you don't have a good heading structure, how will people find the product that they're after? Yes, they may search for it, but a lot of people like browsing. So that's one of the reasons why good heading structure is massively important for pages. Sensible naming for pages as well is really important. And all of this stuff to try and find information also comes through in your search engine optimization as well. So for example, when you are using the search on your site, make sure there isn't a huge number of results coming through that might be overwhelming for people, but just give them the key things. But make sure that people can actually come through and find the specific page that they're after. So, for example, if you have some video on a page that is saying something about a product, none of that video will be indexed by Google unless you put a transcript of that, of what's said in that video on the page. Then suddenly all of that information is available for indexing via Google or Bing or whatever search engine you might be using. And so therefore more people are actually able to find that page. And it's the same when it comes to alt text. The alt text in your images is the thing that brings it up in Google image search. So that sort of thing can be really helpful when you're doing accessibility as well. Just another couple of things when we're looking at people finding things on pages. It's really important to be aware that, for example, Toby might be navigating around your site using his mobile phone, but he doesn't use his mouse quite so much. He might be wanting to speak to his computer to get around the page. That's one example of somebody navigating in a way that isn't necessarily the way you would expect with a touchscreen or a mouse. And the keyboard order of the information on your page can be really important there. So that would be the same if I were tabbing around the page, just using one finger, or if I were using a screen reader. So really important for you to be thinking about these sorts of things as well. So that was finding stuff. How about buying stuff? So if you've now found the thing that you're after, then how will people be able to buy that from you? Well, the first thing to say is that, and again, we wanted to not just rehearse WCAG for those of you who know a lot about accessibility already. So there are various things that we're pulling in from some work that we did with the National Autistic Society to help people who are neurodiverse. So these are people who are autistic or maybe dyslexic, maybe have a learning difficulty. For them, there are some things that you're probably not aware of that really matter to them. Like if you've got loads of animation happening on a page, it can make somebody who's autistic just want to find the back button. So you've now found the product, you're trying to go through the purchasing process, but something on the page is moving around. That can be really off-putting for a lot of people. So it's a good idea to make sure that's not in your checkout process. Similarly, you don't want a process where there's a huge amount of scrolling in there. Most of them don't have that, which is good, but make sure that anybody who doesn't like scrolling around and doesn't like lots on the page isn't overwhelmed when they are now trying to focus on just buying this thing. They don't want any other information at all. Yeah, so clutter-free. Everything needs to be clearly described. So on that page, you'll probably have just some information about this is the thing you're about to buy. So there will be an image there, maybe a lot of images. For example, the supermarkets, online supermarket that I use, the checkout process has got loads of beautiful images of all of the things that I'm buying. If those don't have alt text, then I wouldn't necessarily know what all of those are in that big, long shopping list. So make sure that people can get those either via alt text or, like that particular retailer does, actually provide that information in a textual format as well. As I say, there's lots of other things that people might want to do, like change the colors and all of these sorts of things. You need to make sure that the experience you're giving people gives them a good experience, even if they've zoomed in or they've changed the colors. So lots of information on here. I think the key thing that I would say is that when it comes to the way people go through, there are certain pain points that can really, really be problematic for people who aren't necessarily using the mouse the way you expect them to, or the keyboard or whatever. Authentication can be massively important for a lot of people. And actually, a lot of people who are dyslexic or have memory loss find it really, really difficult to actually log in to buy things. So if you have to log in to buy the product, enabling people to use biometrics, so we're really talking about actually putting this on your mobile app, can be massively important. You'll have noticed that when Toby was talking through the things that make his world much better in terms of digital, each one of those things was a mobile app. That's because Toby prefers mobile to desktop because it's an easier experience for him to hold in his hand. And it's that sort of thinking. There are loads of great stuff that comes with a mobile phone, like Face ID or Touch ID, that can take away some of those problems that might be a real pain point for people who can't remember what their password might be. Similarly, if there are kind of videos on the screen, just making sure that you've got captions there. If somebody is having difficulty listening to it, like we've got today, you can turn on the captions and there is no barriers there at all. The way we tend to think about this is good design is accessible design. It's not either or. Improving the accessibility can actually be a great thing for a lot of people. Coming to real brass tacks though, registration and forms. So it's really important that when people are going through a form that the experience they have is one that they would want to repeat. If you think about the sort of forms that we used to fill in the past before computers, it was never a pleasurable experience. It was the sort of thing that you would get if you wanted to get benefits, and it felt like somebody was trying to torture you with the form to prevent you getting that benefit. That's how it feels still to some people when they're using online forms. It can be really, really annoying for them, especially if you don't tell them why you're collecting the information that you're asking for. If you need to give information in a particular date format, then tell people that. Don't expect them to remember, or that your website works in one way, a different website might work in a different way, and it may be the same again for mobile. Don't rely on tooltips, putting information in there. That's not enough for a lot of people. If there is specific information that people need, put it above it rather than in that kind of grey text within it. And make sure that people can know that they've made a problem and recover from it very easily. Error messages are massively important for you to get right for everyone. Finally, there will be something that you aren't in control of in this process. And that's normally where it's popped off to your payment provider. So I've now put in my Visa number or my MasterCard number, and it's asking me to say, am I myself? Is it going to send me a text message through to my phone, that sort of thing. You aren't always in control of that. The only way that you can be in control of that is if you take control, if you like. If you ask your payment provider, actually, for that last part of the experience, have you thought about accessibility? Great if it's all the way through and then suddenly Visa or MasterCard have actually ruined the experience for people. That's exactly what you don't want. So those kind of iframes that come up, test it out, see if your payment provider is actually giving you a good service. And if you have the ability to change, if they're not giving you a good service, that could be one of the best things you can do for accessibility on the whole of your site. It's not fixing your site, it's fixing your supply chain. So I'm going to hand back over to Pete now, and he's going to take us through, okay, so if you've now found it and bought it, how do you get it? And how does all of this work for accessibility? Pete, over to you.
Thank you, Jonathan. If you can move to the next slide. So I did some work a few years back with a large DIY retailer, and the challenge they had was multiple organizations delivering. So you either might have the Royal Mail, you might have a specialist organization like DPD or Hermes, you might have the vendor of a product sending their own van. And so you have multiple suppliers, you have multiple tools because Royal Mail, DPD, Hermes, and everybody else have different portals. And so how do you provide a consistent experience throughout? And what we have observed is that you need to get the whole thing working for it to feel like a good experience. And you can be really let down by one element of it failing. So I have my pet hate delivery organization. I'm not going to name which one that is, but I know as soon as I buy something online and they said, oh, here's your tracking number with that organization, my heart sinks. And it sinks for several reasons. One is the interface is appalling. Two, you can't give them more information. And three, I've had times when they've thrown a laptop over my wall, landing on the concrete patio, and thankfully it didn't break. So it's worth you considering what's happening on your site around booking deliveries, warehousing. It's very easy to be in headquarters in an area full of very bright developers and then think, well, we'll design the warehousing tools to be exactly the same, or you buy a warehousing product. And you often get a wider range of humanity, a wider range of experience in warehousing, and you need to make sure that your website's internal tools work for them as well. Also think about help and FAQs. Are those accessible? Are those accessible in the right place? And then the track and trace of that side of it, making a choice. Do you overlay your brand on top of a supplier's portal? Maybe using the API to give the information so you've got complete control. Do you give direct access to their portal? So you shift off, here's your tracking, it's over to Royal Mail now. That is quite a big decision point. And then thinking about what else happens, notifications from email, SMS, and apps. So when you're sending your email out, is it very clear? Is it very clear that the button that they press or the link that they press takes them right to the right place? So it's not just the web. And then the returns process. Are you using one of your agents to provide the returns process and label printing? And again, label printing, is the PDF that gets delivered from that accessible? Most of the time, you probably haven't even thought about that. But if I am asking for a printout, I want to make sure that I actually got all the data on it, and I might want to look at the PDF before I print it. And then the tracking inbound is the same as tracking outbound. And is there a clear linkage from the sale to the shop returner? So I know what I've sold, I know what I bought, I know it got returned, you've told me I've returned it, and those things have been cancelled. So there's quite a lot of elements here around third party. So if you are a team running about accessibility, that's where you need to start thinking about taking that back to procurement, taking that back to the requirements you're asking for vendors. So let's move on to the next slide. Another area to consider around accessibility is, do your customers feel supported and can tell you if they need extra support? So we were working with a UK bank, and they are trying to work out how to know if they've got vulnerable customers, and then do they tailor their service, and do they offer things to those vulnerable customers that they might not offer otherwise. So during COVID, they decided to phone up vulnerable customers and check everything was all right. That was a proactive thing to do. But if you take somebody like Toby on our call, it's going to take time to get to the front door. Does the delivery driver need to know that they need to wait longer, rather than ding dong, right, you're not in, here's a piece of paper, you now need to drive to our pickup point to get it? So can your customers tell you if they need extra support? Can they have access to additional services, like the example of the EasyJet? Can they buy extra services like installation and setup? So you don't necessarily have to make these all free, but if you've got the ability to offer them and give people the opportunity, then they have that personalized service. And then don't forget the PDFs. So I talked about the delivery PDF, but what other PDFs do you have? So I took my kids to Chessington World of Adventures and Legoland and places like that. And they give me a printed off ticket. And the date of my trips was really, really small text. They had big text saying, this is your ticket, big text with their logo. And I had to look really quite carefully to see what date of the ticket I had. So if I bought 3 tickets for 3 different dates, it was quite hard work. So thinking about the layout of the PDF, making sure it's accessible. So that's tickets, coupons, your product specifications and data sheets, how-to guides, very importantly, terms and conditions. Are they structured that your customer, when they tick, I've read your terms and conditions, they can actually read your terms and conditions? Instructions, dispatch notes, invoices. There's a whole pile of things to think about, and some of these will come out of your third-party products. So that probably means making sure your media or digital agency is knowing what they need to do to make accessible PDFs, and making sure your digital asset management or your product management tool is storing the information in a correct way, giving you the tags that you need so that you can describe that resource for customers and you know that it's accessible. So there's quite a lot there. Let's move to the next slide. So wow, there's a lot to think about PDFs. What would we suggest as a tip? First of all, start with the accessibility features in the tools that you've got. So Word now has an accessibility checker. InDesign has that, so PowerPoint does. And treat it a bit like spell checkers and grammar checkers. Before you send out a document, have you done the accessibility check? But if this is likely to be a key document that is customer facing, such as an annual report, such as a key product specification or medical information, or if it's a legal document, then the level of accessibility that comes out of a Word created PDF is not sufficient. You're going to have to then spend time and fix the PDF straight in the PDF. And that takes time and is worth budgeting for. So that's why we kind of say, know which ones are for many people and which ones are absolutely key for customers. Last slide on this section. And then somebody's got a great product, they want to tell you about it. I wonder how many people actually think about the review tools. So Trustpilot's out there, you can buy other review tools and you plug them in or you point to them. It's worth just checking whether they provide accessibility features. And if they don't, and you are a powerful retailer, then you've got a chance to push and make a change. What we see with a number of our larger clients is they recognize they are in a powerful position in the market, that if they start telling their providers and suppliers, we want you to be accessible, that turns the tanker for these other people to make a change. So we've talked about thinking about finding stuff, thinking about buying stuff and getting it. And hopefully that's giving you some tips and thoughts about where to look at accessibility. But how do you make that happen? There's a lot of organizations which have at senior levels a real statement and commitment to accessibility, a commitment to diversity and inclusion. And we see there's a couple of important spaces and areas that you can think about in getting this right. So move on to the next slide. We're talking to a retail bank and they said, however much we care about it, however much we know our customer base matches the whole of humanity in the United Kingdom, our advertising and design agencies don't understand accessibility. We keep on having to educate them. So actually, if you move on to the next slide, the challenge is you've probably got quite a large ecosystem of tools and subcomponents and third-party plugins that makes the whole site work. And therefore, there's probably a bit of a program to think about going through those and deciding which ones are most important to make accessible, which ones are crucial to, which ones you can control. So, and which ones have already got a roadmap in place so that the whole end-to-end experience works. And if we think about it right at the start, we will think about access for everybody. If you get it right and it works well and it's simple, it supports those with accessibility needs and everyone benefits. You know, if you take that thing about authentication, for some of the websites I now have, I can authenticate with my fingerprint. Great, I don't have to remember the password anymore. So what might you want to do when you think about it? We've actually got on our website a webinar plus a poster on 5 key questions to ask when you're buying digital apps, sites, or tools. So you might want to grab that and have a look at those questions. But you will have your underlying e-commerce product. So it could be WeCommerce, it could be some other key players. What are they doing in this space? And are they telling you about it that you can switch on the tools? So for example, SAP are trying to have different themes, which have high contrast themes, have black and dark mode themes. Are your teams aware about this? And are you switching them on or giving customers the option? Think about your component services, such as the PDF generators. How accessible are those? We have a third-party tool that we use that generates a PDF, and the PDF generator is not accessible as much as we'd want, but we can't control that. Then you've got your service vendors, your social media managers who might be putting things on your social media site that point to sales, and then you've got vendors and contractors. Is it in the requirements? Do you test your suppliers that they come in, and what do you do about new joiners? So some places make a mandatory training for accessibility for their vendors as well as their employees, because actually the deliverable, whether it's an employee or from a vendor, will end up being the same need. So there's a number of elements to consider around getting it right. And why are we doing this again? Let's go back to the why bother. We wanted to make that loyal 20%. We want to deliver better results. And we see there's 2 elements to help you get there in terms of standards. There's WCAG standards, which you may be aware of, which is around making sure the website looks good, works well, and delivers well. And that's, I feel that's a little bit like having the spell check and grammar check. You wouldn't write a document where its spelling was all over the place. So really useful. And then there's an ISO standard that came out in the last couple of years, ISO 30071-1, which looks at your policies, processes, responsibilities, and governance. And so we hear quite often, and I think somebody put it in the chat, how do we get buy-in? Everyone thinks it's somebody else's problem. The ISO gives you that framework to ask the questions so that it becomes part of the DNA and not part of the endpoint that suddenly becomes the developer or tester's problem at the end. Next slide. And that's because it affects multiple people in the business. So Marcoms, for example, on this slide, we got multiple different roles. So Marcoms needs to think about it because they're going to ask somebody to produce some banners. Sales needs to think about it because they need to structure the product set and make it easy to find. Event managers, if you've got that mix between physical and digital. So if you have, so for example, if you are in a shopping mall and you've got kiosks there, do the kiosks work well? In fact, we've been partnering and talking with an organization called Borough Happold who look at the physical side of shopping. And there's quite a lot of linkage between that and the digital side of shopping. And then you've got the UX designer who needs to think about it and the tester. So many people need to be involved in that. So how do we take stock and make that change? Let's just move on to slide 50. Next one. Yeah, that's great. So we have a free scorecard that you can use. It's a digital maturity scorecard based off this ISO standard. It takes about 60 questions in it, so it takes about 20 minutes to do, worth doing with somebody who's technical and somebody who's non-technical. And this can give you a self-assessment of where you think you are against 9 key elements of the ISO standard. We've seen it used quite well as a way of creating a yardstick in the organization to say, well, actually, we want to head towards the standard, and here's the big gaps. Let's go and talk about how we fill those gaps. We've seen organizations use it as the framework for building their roadmap. So it gives you that kind of North Star for change. And Jonathan, if you can just move to the next stage. And so there is that against the standard. Another thing that we've done for clients is do a benchmark for them around that ISO. So you kind of look at your status and you say, okay, so let's work out what the benefit of getting ISO right is for our organization, because we're going to increase our ability around accessibility. Where's the gaps? What's the real customer experience? So you can do strong audits, which give you good reports about all the changes you need on a site. We also do what we call live audits, which are a much shorter experiential review of a site, looking at different experiences with the dev team. And that's actually a really good change management as well as education approach. We often find we do one, the next one with a client ends up having a whole bunch of other people saying, I really want to understand and listen to this. And so that gives a power which is different from an accessibility report. The other thing we found quite helpful is comparing yourselves to competitors. So if you do the scorecard and you get in touch with me afterwards, I can give you a benchmark of where you are against other people in your industry or other people who filled in the scorecard. And we also can do competitor analysis, and we just kind of say, let's take 10 competitors and what are they doing around talking about accessibility, doing it, funding it, staffing it. And that can be a real aha moment that in some places you're a lone voice, you're shouting about this and nobody's hearing. And then you say, well, actually, look what the other people are doing. And then having a clear roadmap, which is more than just fixing the site for WCAG compliance. That's usually the first thing people think about. But in this conversation today, I hope you've heard about, think about PDFs, think about your suppliers, think about your plugins, and think about the whole journey. So that gives an idea of kind of where you find stuff, you buy stuff, and you receive stuff. We got a few moments ready for questions. So if you got,
Thanks,
over
Pete.
to you, Jonathan.
Yeah, so I've got a few of those questions there. Rob, can you unmute? So there was a question earlier about a little bit of a conversation in the chat about that button in the browser where you can sort of show the password rather than have kind of like it sort of grayed out, as it were, and the kind of dots. Any kind of hints and tips on how to make sure that really works for everyone?
Yeah, I have reviewed this component a few times before on various different sites, and where people have gone wrong is that if you're just using a keyboard and you tab into the input, the next time you tab, it completely bypasses. It's usually a little eye icon. So I have seen that before as well. To fix that, you make sure that the icon is actually coded as a button, and often the way we fixed it in this solution was to move it outside the input. So you tab to the input and then you tabbed to the little icon, and it worked. It worked really well.
That's great. Thanks. As I say, it's really interesting, folks, that accessibility, you have to look at it from all angles at the time. Something that is helping some people so they don't have to remember what they've typed in might be still inaccessible to someone who's using just the keyboard and not using the mouse. So really important that everybody has access to that sort of accessibility functionality. I know we had Tiro Mani. I don't know if I've pronounced your name right. You were asking about vulnerability and banks and things like that. Yeah, it's an area that I think people are trying to kind of learn a lot more on. Again, you won't find it anywhere in the accessibility guidelines, but we work with a number of banks. I know they're getting really interested in this. So if you've got particular points that you want to make or questions you want to ask, please just contact us via our website, because we'd be really helpful to, really happy to help you in that. We had a question about the main version versus accessible version when it comes to flyers. Yeah, people have this idea that it's either or, that it's kind of beautiful or accessible. And there's a lot of really great stuff in our design training, actually, about how to try and get away from that. Google did some really, really good stuff about how to get aesthetic and accessible design both together. So it is possible. There's stuff in our training. One person downloaded bought the ISO 30071 Part 1 that I created for ISO from their site and found that the PDF wasn't massively accessible. Sorry about that. I don't control ISO. I wrote the standard, but they published it. And unfortunately, yeah, even accessibility standards aren't always massively accessible because the organizations, ISO in that case, don't get things perfect. Someone asked about infographics. We've done some stuff in previous sessions of the webinar on that. So if you go onto HiHub, you'll be able to find some things on there. So just the last bit, in the minute that we've got left, we just wanted to say, we do these sorts of things completely for free because we want to get information out there to help people who are passionate about accessibility. If you're on the school, that's you. We want to say that you can get really good at this. You know, if you can afford our training, then come to that. If you can't, there'll be another webinar along in a month. So, and you'll be kind of building your skills as you go through. It's about trying to share this throughout your organization. That's the key thing that we would love you to do. And it's the reason why we make this stuff available for free on HiHub. As I say, anybody can register on there. So if there are people in your organization who need this stuff, go and send them to our website and get them to the stuff they need. Next month, we're going to be talking about accessible design, some of those things that were there, minimal interfaces, wild typography. This is what people in the know out there in the design community are saying are the design trends of 2022. When we talk to our clients, they're not talking about any of that stuff at all. They're talking about things that are a lot more functional. And we want you to get answers to your design questions. So if you are a designer or a product manager, somebody responsible for how a website or a mobile app looks or works, then we would really, really value your questions. We're literally going to devote as much as possible to this session next month to answering the questions that you have. So please sign up for it. As I say, the link should be there in the chat. There it is. And as I say, if you have your design questions, when you register, put your design question in there. If you need to send us some screenshots or whatever to help us understand what your question is, then contact us through our Contact Us form, and we'll make sure that we can get those from you. But the key thing next month is we want to answer your design questions. So send them through to us and we'll be delighted to give you all of those. So thank you so much. As I say, you can if you can't find or can't use the Contact Us form, then contact@hasselinclusion.com will get you what you need as well. I hope that's given you an insight into how accessibility can help everything in retail work so much better. If you do this sort of stuff and you work in that area, I guarantee you will make more money from your website, your stores, your mobile app, every different way that people engage with you. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. As I say, I hope you've really, really enjoyed it and hope to see you next time. Thanks very much. Have a good afternoon. Cheers. Bye-bye.